Hey, everybody. So my name is Mickey, and I'll be the moderator for today. We were kind of excited about putting this panel together because we wanted to kind of talk about the ecosystem involved, and not just startups, not just government labs or academic labs or the funder environment or the big incumbent companies, but kind of how they all work together. And so I'm super excited to have a nice sampling here for us to talk about. So I'm from BCG, probably your mental model of Boston Consulting Group or any of the big consultancies is it's a whole bunch of MBAs, which wouldn't be surprising. I'm actually a product designer and industrial designer by training, and I think you might be surprised by some of the other BCGers that are floating around. We've got somebody in the audience here who's on the quantum computing side of things, and that's his focus. So an interesting sampling, and I think to start, I think part of this is just leadership. How do we work with Fortune 500s? How do we actually build a good ecosystem? And one of the stories I love is that at Procter & Gamble, where Amy's at, about more than a decade ago, the CEO, A.G. Lafley, said, I want 50% of our new products to not be research and develop, but actually connect and develop. I want to connect with those open innovation kind of ecosystems and actually do that. And a decade later, they actually have done that. And so even though you might think of Procter & Gamble or P&G as a giant company that you know of because of the products that they make, it took leadership and it took sort of foresight to say, let's actually embrace connecting with people who have great ideas instead of necessarily researching and developing them all ourselves and being more entrepreneurial. And Amy, you were actually part of Connect and Develop for quite a while.
Yes, I was.
So tell me a little bit about your life. You've been at P&G for a long time. Not surprising, P&G just grows people from within, which is wonderful. But tell me about your current role, and then what are some success examples that you're super proud of or you're excited about, maybe that are even in the pipeline around sort of partnerships or around different ways of doing things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Procter & Gamble for 24 years. It's a great place to have a career because you can continually reinvent yourself, and I've had the opportunity to do that in my time there. I've worked across a variety of categories and different functions, focusing largely on health and beauty roles, but I did have about 4 years working within our open innovation team, and the networks I build there have been invaluable to the work that I'm doing today, which is working as a director for our responsible materials innovation group with focus on beauty care. And so I think that as we look towards more responsible materials for our products going forward, a huge enabler for that is going to be biosynthetic materials and synthetic biology as a tool and a huge enabler. So I'm very excited about the potential there. There are things in the pipeline, and so I'm hoping that in the next year or years, I will be able to come with multiple success stories, right? I think we've had some great success stories in the past, and those have laid the foundation for kind of a roadmap for how we can go forward, and so I'm looking forward to what we can do going forward, particularly with synthetic biology.
What has turned out to be a partnership model or a way you've partnered that you find has worked?
We have lots of different partnership models. I mean, there is no one partnership that I would say has been successful across the board. I think we approach things in a very individual basis, and so what is the best win-win scenario for a given situation, right? We always want to have partnerships that have win-wins for all parties involved, and it isn't always a two-way partnership. It could be a consortia, it could be three-way, right? And I think, obviously, larger constellations get complicated, but I think they're also very powerful, right? And when those can come together and work well, it's incredibly powerful, right? You create a win-win for everybody involved.
And so to make that really tangible, you mentioned that one of the things you've done is some of your suppliers, like BASF, have brought interesting material science companies or startups or other people to you, and that almost helped you cut through. P&G has to be very protective because it's a giant company and has to find a way to build trust. And in these places, trust is going to be a big deal for making this work.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, we are a large company and we're somewhat risk averse when we're looking at new technologies. And so we're always looking for what are the ways in which we can develop partnerships that de-risk for us, right? And so things like what you just mentioned, now some of the larger suppliers are starting to reach out and acquire technologies through startups. And so what that does for us is it de-risks that initial development, right? Because what's hard is if a startup comes to us and has a technology that's very nascent and they need a couple of $1 million to do the development work. Well, it's really hard for us to lean into that until we, know on some level that this will be successful either at scale or for the application that we're interested in. And so when you have a supplier or some other partner, right, it could be a CMO that is an intermediate there, it de-risks it for us, right? And then we're able to lean in a little bit more and learn and invest together. So.
Excellent. And so Jason, you're doing something that is a company creation studio. And you used to be at Ginkgo and spent a lot of time there, but this is not Ginkgo, even though it says it uses the platform for Ginkgo. Can you tell us what the heck is Ferment Co?
Sure, absolutely, with pleasure. So Ferment Co is a company creation studio that works to set up and spin off the next wave of product-based synthetic biology companies. And so what we endeavor to do is find markets where synthetic biology has a toehold, but where it's been either under-leveraged or under-resourced, and where if we capitalize and create a new company that can move quickly, and move quickly by working with Ginkgo to accelerate some of the cell engineering work, we often also bring in strategic corporate investors to help accelerate commercial, capitalize the company in such a way that it can pursue multiple programs and go aggressively down faster than incumbents are going to move. We think we can create an opportunity to kind of own a market before incumbents who may be slow to adopt synthetic biology as a new growth curve or technology curve otherwise would be able to do.
So I think what's interesting there is it's a different business model and or value economic approach. That might say, you're a big company, you've got IP or you've got reach, you've got channel, you've got something, but you might have a hard time developing it internally. But why not team up with other investors and create something new, and then you'll have the benefit later of taking advantage of it.
1,000%. I mean, to build on that, I spent 7 years with Ginkgo developing strategic partnerships, doing the large enterprise sale, right? That complex sale, and spent a lot of time thinking about the applications for engineered cells, right? Where they create value, where they don't, where to get them, what to pay for it. And so we take those learnings now into the philosophy of company building, right? Applying them. And ironically, sometimes it is easier for a large corporate partner to make a yes-no decision on an investment into a company than it is to go into a complex joint development. But sometimes it's not. But the point is there are different modalities now.
This isn't one size fits all. It's just
Absolutely.
sort of how do the different organisms in the ecosystem, if we think of this as truly an ecosystem,
Sure.
How do they exchange value? What's the currency?
How do they exchange value and how do they trade risk?
Yeah.
Right? And what's the risk profile that you can put on a different engagement? And what's the right vehicle for that? Sometimes a company is the right vehicle, sometimes an arm's length partnership.
So John, you were at DARPA, which was created famously after Sputnik flew overhead, and the Joint Chiefs and the Congress and the President were like, did anybody expect that? No, sir, that was a complete surprise. We need a Department of Strategic Surprise. And so that was DARPA, and you were particularly in DARPA's DARPA, which was the DSO, which was sort of that rarefied space where they were really inventing new things. You're not maybe the average person I would picture when I think of BCG. What are you doing right now? Why is BCG up here on stage? Why are we interested in synthetic biology and quantum computing and things like that?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think the strategy is really the key, right? This idea of strategic surprise. A lot of what BCG prides itself on is asking the right question. It's maybe the idea of how you're thinking about how to apply these new technologies isn't really the right way to view it. And by recouching how you think about transformation of entire value chains, or really working backwards from some preposterous future, as Steve Jurvetson puts it, and then really identifying those key leverage points where a technology investment, whatever the choice of vehicle, is the right way to unlock value is really exciting. Now, what's really exciting about why I'm at BCG is as I think a Ginkgo speaker highlighted earlier today, the enterprise community understands, or the large corporate community understands digital. But at BCG, what we're really excited about is what is this physical post-digital opportunity? synthetic biology is part of that.
Suddenly atoms are involved.
Atoms are involved. It's not just bits, it's bits and atoms. And there aren't really clear heuristics for that. So navigating this territory of business risk, technology, which is where someone like me or other expert PhDs at the firm, which we do have, there's a cadre of us, help provide that interface. And really this idea of process, like the way that you think about doing corporate venture, M&A, partnering with an accelerator or studio is inherently different. And I think helping our clients navigate that process effectively so it's value creating as opposed to being value destroying, which it frequently is really the exciting aspect of what we try to do.
Well, I think it's interesting, at BCG, when I joined and learned about what was happening a few years ago, I found out about this thing called digital ventures, which was to help with people doing these ventures. It was a little bit like Ferment Co, but for digital things, for the people you walk the halls with at BCG, the customers, the big incumbents. But in a sense, what we now need is sort of biologic ventures, which is certainly what Ferment is doing.
Exactly.
And large corporates, leaders, trust us, trust the BCGers. They've built long-term relationships with them, but they don't even know, they don't even know if there are true believers like Amy lurking inside the company, or if there are people who are willing to do that, or even how to become a true believer in this biological moment. And it feels like that's an important aspect of what you're doing here.
It is. It's that translation of technology unlock with business value in a way that aligns a lot of internal stakeholders from brand manager to production to R&D in a way that really has to come from the C-suite to really achieve success. Otherwise, I think you're going to be very slow and patient and risk averse. So, we really try to
You've got to have that heat shield.
You've got to have the heat shield.
Like someone
exactly.
has to be able to hold back. And that may be the C-suite, or it may be a senior leader or something like that. And that historically has been really important.
It's critical to, I think, a strategic transition of the sort that we're really aiming at to achieve these very ambitious net zero goals, or to achieve the kind of resilience and substantive transformation in value chains or supply chains that we were discussing is not going to happen by moving a few things at the margin and doing some substitutions.
Well, in the very beginning of this, you said it's about asking different questions. And I think that's this notion of a lot of the things we even see in videos, in the discussions around synthetic biology, are almost like taking what we already do. This is what a Nike shoe looks like, and here's a Nike shoe, but grown out of mycelium or something like that. But it may be that that's not right. That's like chipping at the edges. It could be that we need to ask new questions. We need to reframe the questions, because a biological future might look very different. And that feels important. Jason, I'm curious, why is partnering so hard? Like you spent 7 years trying to kind of make those things happen. What did you see?
I wouldn't qualify it as necessarily so hard. I think that in a lot of cases with a new technology, it's a kind of an educational consultative sell, right? So you're dropping into a company that maybe hasn't considered biology as a solution set for things they want to accomplish, right? So first of all, you've got to learn their language, learn their business, learn their problems, and then help them articulate problem statements to you that you can then translate to the technology teams you're working with to see where is their relevance, where is their fit, and then what do the economics look like such that we could bring something through. So I would say that it's complex in that there's that, a dialogue. You're not showing up with your rate card, right? It's not like a SaaS business where things are extremely, well mapped. There's learning, and then there's this convening of the right agents and decision makers within an organization, right? You've got the technology teams, then you've got the P&L leader in the business whose goals you're trying to enable. There's usually folks in between, and so it's about bringing the right people around the table. It's not unlike any complex enterprise sale. It's just that it tends to be more on the novel side of things.
Yeah, I mean these require patience and trust, and in some ways, seeing through the hard times. Because this is not about quarterly earnings. This is not about I'm going to have a quick win in
and I would say
4 months.
it's getting easier.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the track record since 2014 has gotten consistently better. There are many, many more companies engaging in the space, many more success stories to point to, and just momentum.
So Amy, you said when we were just prepping for this that that you've been coming here, you've been sponsoring this for quite a while, but only in the last short time you started to really get other people at P&G knocking on your door and saying like, wait, we need this. Why do we need this?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I was excited to move into the beauty care organization is because that organization is pulling for new materials to help enable essentially our sustainability goals, right? We have some really strong, serious goals, right? I mean, we have a declaration of net zero by 2040. It's going to take a lot, and it's going to take something dramatic to help us get there, right? We're not 100% sure how we're going to, I mean, we're not at all sure how we're going to get there today. But, you know, we need to start looking at what are going to be the enablers for this. And I have a very firm belief that biosynthetic materials are really going to help us to achieve those goals. And so as I've talked more about that.
That may be the only way we can achieve those goals.
Maybe, right? And so, you know, as I've talked this being synthetic biology, as an enabler internally, it's gotten a lot of people excited and they're starting to pull, right? Whereas I was pushing before, now I'm getting pull. And I think beauty care is very forward leaning because today these materials still, you know, command some level of premium, right? And so we can learn in the beauty care category because we have consumers who are willing to be early adopters and pay the premiums to get the products that are really—
This is going to help you learn as an organization.
Exactly. So you can learn in specific parts of the broader P&G company with organizations that are willing to be a little bit more experimental, and then that can trickle down.
Which gives you proof points that you can point to within the organization to say, we can do this.
Exactly.
We believe in it. We can do it. We've heard a little bit about what Jason has been up to with Ferment Co. How does that change your calculus? I mean, what's your reaction to a company creation studio?
Yeah, I love it, right? Because it's exactly that de-risking element where, you know, someone like Ferment can come in, help work with the startups. We have needs briefs and problem statements, you know, and so we have those, and we're looking for what are the technical solutions to help, you know, address those problem statements. In fact, we have a whole website. If you come to our booth, we have a little website that directs you to what some of our problem statements are. And coming to us with, you know, something that is a little bit more cooked in the sense of, you know, here's how, you know, we know how we believe we have line of sight on how we can scale this. Here's a little bit of material that you can take into your labs, formulate with, see if it meets your performance profile, or better yet, if we give you the performance profile, the company can come back and say, here's how this material performs against that, right? That de-risks this whole early development phase of new technology acquisition for us, and then we're much more open to kind of working and partnering and putting the next level partnerships in place to enable that further growth, right?
I mean, to build on that, maybe give a specific example. I think we saw the same signature in personal care and beauty, right? Rising consumer values around sustainability, but dissatisfaction with the trade-off between natural sustainable products and the performance of those products. And so we specifically set up a new co called Archaea, focused on active beauty and leveraging biotech as a source for next wave of ingredients. And so the strategic investors in that company are Chanel, you know, privately owned massive beauty company with a 100-year vision over the arc of how technology will change. Olaplex, challenger brand in hair care, very innovation focused. Givaudan, sophisticated ingredient supplier, and the idea there is why do strategics want to be part of a company that will be potentially disrupting their industry? Well, it's they can leverage that disruption, right, by being at the table,
be a part of it,
rather than on the table,
exactly,
so to speak. And from the perspective of, well, you know, how is this more seamless as an interface? Well, rather than underwriting the risk around the development programs, they can instead underwrite and own equity in a company. Right, that company is going to be much better capitalized to go after a particular program.
And so it helps with just a different economic value exchange model.
It's different on the balance sheet too, right? It's an R&D expense, formerly an R&D expense. Now it's ownership in a piece of equity in a company.
So John, I'm curious, what are some examples of partnering from BCG's experience in this space? Like, what are you seeing that you're starting to see early signals of how BCG can help with partnerships or with kind of activating this ecosystem?
So I think I'll double click on the process piece. So Jason's highlighted a studio-based model, which is a really outstanding way to address risk for certain kinds of corporates that have certain types of business models. For other types of clients, what we're really seeing is that we're trying to move to a more agile build-to-learn model where you can absorb risk. So this is how SpaceX works, right? So if you contrast Lockheed with SpaceX, every launch, every test, all the process for every SpaceX booster is always built around maximizing learning value. And so
speed to learning.
It's speed to learn, right? It's basically about how fast, how agile, how quickly can you build knowledge that provides you a competitive moat against your competitors. And so a studio is obviously one way to do that at some price. There's other ways you can do it that put on your R&D P&L, right? Actually, it's just an L because it's a cost center. And so part of that is we are finding for certain clients that the ability to partner and co-develop early provides a way to activate that ecosystem scale learning for both the venture and for the corporate, but it requires a very thoughtfully designed sort of knowledge ecosystem between all parties to make that successful. I mean, there's a reason why SpaceX is vertically integrated, right? Because they can close all those loops fast. They don't have to deal with 18 sub-suppliers. They just do it themselves. So really the exciting part for a corporate who really wants to transform, be agile, take full advantage of digital, and then integrate that into activating this kind of an ecosystem to move from just bits to bits and atoms is really, I think, kind of bleeding edge right now. And then as you step back from that, you move into these other kinds of models with studios and so on.
And in some ways, you're helping convene those because you have that trust relationship, and you can say, let's actually facilitate this and make this happen.
And that is, from for that particular kind of engagement for a venture, it allows them to navigate the full value chain within the corporate in a way that's more orchestrated or slightly more straightforward depending on the instance. But again, it requires careful thought up front, right? Because there's many ways for that to run off the rails.
John, I want to stay on you for a second. How do you avoid the danger of the fragility of a startup and the bureaucracy of a big Fortune 50, Fortune 100 company, Fortune 500 company?
That's a great question. I think
maybe that's not an easy
Jason and Amy probably both have lived this many times, and it's very hard. So I think what we've been circling today is, okay, there's at one extreme is what I just described, is you change the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Right? You re-engineer the bureaucracy so it's built around a decision cycle and information generation, knowledge creation acts as an impedance match. Right? At the other extreme is you just acknowledge the fact that you have no hope of making that work, and then you offload it and then run 2 clock cycles. Right? And then the in-between is the interesting piece, which is, I think, at some level perhaps what CVC tries to do, right, is you're looking for ways to episodically inject the scale and reach of the corporate, because it's a really poor use of venture money to, like, for example, in a different sector, I've been talking to people who work in building materials. Right? There's actually been a huge amount of venture money poured into efficient glass, but it's not terribly high return. The economics, the business analysis of that is pretty weak, to be candid. And a lot of it is poured into basically rebuilding infrastructure to make windows at scale that already exists. So if you're a materials supplier trying to make a super efficient, highly insulative window, it'd probably be a lot better just to build on the scale, testing, knowledge, tooling of the corporate, and then have them inject that at appropriately chosen milestones where those key risks need to be retired from the perspective of your investor or your corporate partner.
Amy, I'm curious, maybe a 2-part question. One of them would be, why do we need an ecosystem? P&G's pretty good. Can't you just do this yourself? And the second part is, what are your aspirations? Like, if we're looking forward at world changing, like, what are your big dreams for what could happen?
Yeah. So to address the first part of your question, I think, as I said before, yes, we do have a lot of capabilities internally, but to quote what you were saying about A.G. Lafley saying 50% needs to come from external. I mean, we've done a lot of that over the years, right? And we're finding that there is so much more knowledge and so many smarter people out of P&G than internal, and that's no slam on any of the P&Gers because we're very talented, but we're limited in what we can do, and we can do more when we reach externally, right? And so I think there is a world of possibility externally that we're more effective at partnering to bring in and co-develop or acquire or work on some of these other new models that are starting to pop up. We can be much more effective in that way. We're not vertically integrated in most of our businesses, and so we don't try to bring everything in-house and do it all of ourselves. We found that we are more successful when we're not and when we partner to do things.
And what about aspirations? You know,
aspirations? Yes. Well, I would
where can we
love
go?
to see biosynthetic materials being a very big part of the products that we develop in the future, not just for our sustainability goals, but certainly for that, but also for what I strongly feel can uniquely be enabled by synthetic biology from a performance standpoint.
So new kinds of performance. Yeah.
Absolutely. The consumer tensions are always front and center at the development work that we do on any of our products, right? And so we're always trying to find what is the next performance, leap that we can make with our products. And that's where the laundry enzymes, way back before it was even talked about as synthetic biology, right, came in. They provided a benefit that was step changing for the consumer in the clothing washing, job. And that is the kind of model that I'd like to follow going forward, where I strongly believe that biosynthetic materials can enable some really step changes in performance for the consumer, in addition to being more sustainable.
Yeah, not just it's great for the environment or all
Exactly.
that stuff, which is wonderful, but if we can find an unmet need or an unvoiced need that the consumer would really get excited about, that could be powerful.
Exactly.
Jason, I want to talk about world changing. You're trying to change the world and use this different sort of exchange model and ecosystem value model. What are some successes out there that give you hope? Just the early things you're doing that point the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So I'll highlight maybe two. What excites me is that I think we're starting to see the dots connect and connect quicker as we do more reps, as we do more company builds. I'll give an example with Alonia, who many of you heard Nicole Richards and Dial Sarin speak earlier today, right? The company build came out of an intuition 3 years ago when the conversation in the waste market started to change around how do we reduce the costs of disposal to actually how do we think about mining waste as an alternative value stream, right? And so when we saw that conversation shifting, we realized that these were areas where biology was really well advantaged, where mechanical processing and chemical processing had potentially plateaued. And so that opened the door to a new company creation that you now all know as Alonia, that's going after emerging contaminants like perfluorinated compounds, which at the time was percolating and is now clearly going to be the next major regulated ingredient or regulated toxin. And so I think sort of having line of sight or having early intuitions around opportunities excites me. And then I'll highlight another specific example of a company that we announced on Monday called Biome Edit. This was a company focused on animal health, so via the microbiome. So Elanco, large public animal health company, had these mature assets in their microbiome platform. We're looking to dispose of them. We had an early sense that we could take those assets and some of the team members build a new co around it, put it on Ginkgo's platform, accelerate a second wave of product, and now go quickly and aggressively into animal health, which has a tremendous sustainability benefit, right, by increasing efficiency and reducing disease in animal populations. And that came together quite quickly. And it didn't take, we started talking about the difficulty of enterprise level sales, and actually what we saw in this context, it was completely obvious to everyone, including Elanco, why Ginkgo would be an enabler and why this was the right vehicle.
This platform would help.
So starting to see the learning curve in action. So those two examples are gratifying, but what I get the most excited about is when I see founders coming in who are not technical, who have track record in other product areas or industries and don't understand synthetic biology maybe from a technical level, but do see it as an emerging technology class that they want to get involved in, and they're asking, how can I build my next company in this technology genre?
So John, I want to give you the last word. So I'm curious about just ecosystems, your view on this, or BCG's view on this, and where you see the big world-changing opportunity.
So I think I can echo both Amy and Jason's sentiments that it is the future. I think what we're also advocating in our work is that to make the kinds of systemic changes we have to make to get to net zero, this is not a journey that a single company, a single venture can do, or even a set of companies. You have to think about really the entire system of systems, right? So an example at the Hello Tomorrow conference was Air France, Safran, Total Energy, talking about transition to hydrogen aviation fuel by 2050. Right? It will require the collective will and effort of an entire value chain to really rethink how we're going to actually get to that, right? I mean, I think small incremental improvements from any of these individual companies are tremendously valuable, but to make the kind of shift that we need, we have to do things much more collectively together in a way that I think it's encouraging to see that the community here really starting to coalesce around some of what that could look like.
All right, I wish we had another 20 minutes at least, because I have lots more questions piled up. Try to find this amazing group of people out there. They'll be here for the next day or two. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, John.
Absolutely.
And thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, guys. That was awesome.